Bien, seguimos con el programa de conferencias en Expodronica virtual. Nuestra siguiente conferencia la dará David Meszaros, CEO de SmartKas. Welcome, David.
Good morning. Thank you.
Is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the warm welcome. My name is Dr. David Meszaros. I'm the CEO and founder of SmartKas BV, a smart agricultural enterprise. We are based in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam. And essentially, we have created a hybrid solution between vertical farming and hermetically closed greenhouses. And we call this solution the SmartKas solution. So what SmartKas does, if you want to give a little introduction to it, is actually it's an all-around global smart agricultural solution where you can farm 24/7 hours a day, 7 days a week, and 365 days a year. So essentially, we created a non-stop circle where we can farm with a higher yield, with infinitely scalable setting that is energy, waste, and water neutral. And our solution is AI-run, drone and robotics assisted, automated, and partially unmanned, and it can be deployed and installed anywhere in the world. So what are the unique solutions? What are the unique selling points of the structure? Well, we use zero energy. Whenever we say zero, we actually mean zero external input of energy, and zero external input of water, zero external input of waste. What this means is that we are completely relying on green, sustainable electricity sources, such as solar energy, hydropower, wind energy, and the combination thereof. We always decide this based on the region, the country, what are the ruling resources. And then, of course, we have optimized the energy consumption and also the efficiency of the transportation and storage of electricity with the use of increased battery capacity and also photovoltaic cells installed in the glass as opposed to solar panels. The zero water feature of the structure comes from not only the recirculation, as it does in traditional greenhouses. So it's not only that we are recirculating 95% of the circulating supply of water inside the structure, but we also generate, so create in addition to this, the 5 to 6% that is missing by way of atmospheric water generation, dehumidification, rainwater capture, and various other methods. And for large-scale installations, we use seawater, but more on that later. The zero waste property of our structure does not only mean that zero waste is input to the installation, but also zero waste is output. This means that the water, for example, is pre-treated and post-treated. The air filtration system also makes sure that no dirty, polluted air gets pumped out of the system. And what's most important in terms of greenhouses is that CO2 is regulated at perfect levels. So we try not to exert any CO2 into the atmosphere. All of the above then contributes to a controlled and monitored environment that is assisted through AI, drones, robotics, blockchain, and cloud computing software. So what do we get as a result? As a result, we get astronomical yield that is 100 to 200 times higher per land area compared to field farming, and 10 to 20 times higher compared to the traditional high-tech hydroponic greenhouse. In addition to this, the system itself is foreign substance free. This does not mean that we do not add vitamins, nutrients to the plants, but we do not need to have any kind of foreign substance in the form of herbicides, pesticides, because the system is hermetically closed and everything is being filtered as it enters. Therefore, there are no bacteria or diseases. And we also use a special system whereby every single crop can be in its own chamber, whereby if there is any disease spreading, then we can remove that chamber, replace it, clean it, analyze it. And this is done by way of thermographic imaging, as well as drones and robots. So then what are the unique features when you add all of this together? You end up with high annual productivity per land area, This means that the 100 to 200 times higher production, high weight percentage of marketable parts. This is very important, especially in countries with very outdated agricultural methods, because what people often neglect is that it's not only about the gross harvest, it's also about the net harvest, what you can actually market, what you can actually use and eat. In traditional agricultural enterprises, this can go as high as to 60% wasted. That's, of course, a highly inefficient system. And we have optimized this with the use of AI and robotics. And now it's 9-0. So we usually, for the sake of simplicity, calculate with a 5% loss. High quality parts. This means that due to the usage of high precision or ultra high precision farming, we can monitor and nurture every single plant individually. And therefore, we also know what they're doing, how they're growing, and if they need any special treatment or replacement. The high reproducibility and predictability of yield and quality means that a farmer, a SmartKas unit owner, or a government, in case of a government-size project, knows exactly what they will produce every single month. And this will be also at a sustained, stable level throughout the year. So from January to December, we produce at an even sustainable level. This is also very important from another perspective, which is the high traceability throughout the supply chain, because essentially also contributing to the EU's farm to fork agenda, you can trace from seed level or young plant level until it gets on your plate or ends up in a supermarket. So essentially we promote full traceability. This is of course only as possible as much as the industry partners and the supply chain allows it. But we strive towards working only with partners who are promoting green and sustainable production. Then the high adaptability for the location means that we can very easily switch crops within the same cell, within the same climate cell. This means that once an installation is ready, which is normally speaking a huge investment amount, we do not have to worry about having to replace this the next coming years because it's outdated or because the market demands a different type of crop. We can simply switch out the macro elements, and then all the frame and the electronica can stay the same. The high controllability of sanitary conditions has both indirect and direct benefits. One of the direct benefits is that the colony forming unit is less than 500. For those of you who are interested in a normal greenhouse setting, the CFU, which is basically the bacteria count, can be more than 10,000, which means that you have to wash and post-treat the plants or even use pesticides before they are able to be served. In our case, this is not necessary, so you can pick, let's say, a strawberry from our units and directly eat it. This, in combination with the direct cooling and packaging in our packaging stations that are stationed right next to the SmartKas unit, contributes to a double shelf life. So this is twice as long as normal greenhouse products, which of course, again, directly contributes to the reduction of food waste and, well, indirectly water waste, etc. Cameras and aerial drones are necessary for the nurturing and the monitoring, and they're also assisting with the predictability. And this, again, contributes to the sustained and stable levels of not only the inputs, so water, electricity, the air quality, CO2, etc., but also to the outputs, so that a farmer as a businessman, because in the end they are also businessmen, can calculate with a fixed amount of yield and therefore fixed amount of profit. And this makes it also easier for supermarket chains, hotels, restaurants to contract with a SmartKas unit owner, because they can then contract for a fixed offtake, meaning X amount of tons will be delivered every single week without any volatility. The climate computer, harvesting rigs, and harvesting robots enable us to install SmartKas units also in areas where there was never any farming done before. This can be as simple as the desert, where we can also indirectly contribute to reforestation, or it can be as extreme as mountainsides, ocean, or even frozen tundras, where there was no possibility of farming before. And then the above basically contributes to transparency, traceability, and maximum food security. This has very interesting effects on the market. Some of you might be aware of index-based insurances, which are pain points of the agri-industry. Because of the nature of traditional agriculture, there is a high volatility and seasonality effect. And because of this, you have to rely on index-based insurance in case there is an act of God, there's a problem or a disaster with the yield. However, with our structures, since everything is sustained and stable, there is full food security and there is no need for such index-based insurances. So how is it built up? How do the various components work together with each other? Essentially, the main resource that we rely on for energy and heating is solar power, but it's not exclusive to solar, and it's not to be confused with solar panels. We use a special photovoltaic glass that is built into the frame of the glass, which means that as the sun is shining, we make use of the natural nurturing effect and power of the sun, as well as the energy and electricity that can be generated that way. And since we rely on 100% green energy, we are energy and waste neutral. There are some niche cases, like the waste to food cases that we are working on, whereby we are taking the energy source of projects such as gas stations or heating stations or other oil and natural gas refineries. And then we use the byproduct of this that would not only be released into the atmosphere, which is millions of tons of CO2 on a yearly basis, globally speaking, and then transforming this into heat, electricity, and CO2, containing it within the SmartKas unit and effectively turning waste to food. All of these levels cannot be controlled manually. Artificial intelligence and a cloud computing software is responsible for regulating these levels so that we make sure that whether it's day or night, whether it's a weekday or a weekend, even on holidays, the SmartKas system can operate uninterrupted. So we discussed the energy, but what about the water? We get a lot of interesting questions, and rightfully so. How do we operate without water? We do not operate without water. What we do operate is without external source of non-renewable water, because we recirculate 90–95%, depending on crop type, of course, of the circulating water supply of the entire system. And then the missing amount is created, generated through either freshwater capture, rainwater capture, if there is a freshwater and rainwater supply, and depending on the country, atmospheric water generation, if the humidity is higher than 10–12%, up to 55%, 55 Celsius, and seawater desalination for extremely large projects, that should be 50 hectare plus, or in some cases even 100 hectare would warrant it. Whereby we are connecting the station to either seawater or other types of available water supply to a river, pre-treat it, desalinate it, and then use it for irrigation purposes. The water that we generate this way is also safe for human consumption, which is why both from the energy and the water categories, we are positive. This means energy positive and water positive. Which can be essentially used for entire settlements in Africa, for example, where the SmartKas unit can become the beating heart of a new smart village or smart city. And then through connection to the smart grid, the underlying grid of that city, the excess water and electricity can be redeployed and distributed between the housing units. We use the most advanced climate control and LED technology. Essentially, we have a hybrid lighting solution whereby during daytime we make use as much as possible of natural elements such as the sun, but then during nighttime and during the more cloudy and darker months of the year, we rely increasingly on artificial lighting and artificial photosynthesis. All of this also contributes to shorter and faster cultivar cycles. So the plants are not only growing day around, month around, year round, but also at a faster pace, but still remaining organic in nature. And of course, all of this combined effectuates a increased yield per target area. We have the luxury or the flexibility of being able to choose and switch between the two extreme ends of the spectrum. One extreme end would be, of course, the indoor or vertical farming units. These are extremely efficient and effective and also have a high yield output. However, they can be very expensive to install, especially when you're talking about automated and unmanned systems. On the other hand, you have the more cost-effective greenhouse installation that can be more large-scale if there is enough land. We would place SmartKas somewhere in the middle. However, we have the possibility to install both of these extremes of the spectrum as per the needs of the country. For example, if it's an increasingly urban or metropolitan country and there are a lot of large cities growing into each other, and it would take a long time to deliver fresh produce to the consumers, then we can install a semi-urban installation and also take care of last mile delivery with the use of drones, essentially connecting SmartKas into the city's infrastructure and then creating a non-stop supply of fresh produce. The three most important features of the entire project as a whole, so this is not just as a technology, but it's also our philosophy, core philosophy, is that we should be infinitely scalable, globally deployable, and climate resistant. The infinite scalability does not only mean that we can scale it upwards infinitely and therefore build as large units as possible. But it also means that you can scale the units down to smaller family farms, and eventually, when we get to that point, hopefully in the next 4 to 5 years, also to families. And then essentially you can create an entire network of small SmartKas units collaborating with each other, communicating with each other, and exchanging not only information, but in a utopistic future, also water and electricity, of course. The globally deployable nature means what I already said, that we can install the unit anywhere in the world. This is especially interesting in places like Africa and South America, where due to the lack of infrastructure, greenhouses, especially high-tech greenhouses, could not be built previously. And this led to either deforestation for agri purposes or pure starvation of the population because there was no alternative solution. And now we have a solution for this and essentially install a unit without any pre-existing infrastructure, essentially jumping between industrial revolutions, because then we can directly just jump to the fourth industrial revolution by skipping steps. The climate-resistant nature essentially complements the previous 2 points. We do not have any limits, whether it's too cold or too warm, too arid or too humid. We are fully adapting to the environment around us, and that also is true for the input and the output numbers. So then what are the effects on the world? What happens to farmers? What happens to jobs? Will robots ever take over? This is, again, a frequent question that we get from governments, regional governments, and also interested parties, supermarket chains. We only have to think about our past, and historical data has shown that no jobs truly disappear, and these effects have already taken place. Instead, jobs are transformed. As opposed to having people working on the fields, we started using machines, tractors, combines, and this is basically a recurring process whereby we are constantly adapting in a co-evolution with our machines to better and better practices, and therefore we can reduce water spillage, soil erosion, and a very important factor is the volatility and seasonability of not only the production, but also the employment. And this leads us to a new era of food production, where, as I mentioned, the jobs are transformed and do not disappear. In this case, the AI and the drones and robots do not replace the human input, well, not fully at least, but they help control. That also means that a grower and operator does not need to have 24/7 attention to a particular unit. They can essentially alternate between units and between sites, and then let the AI partially take over. This can also have a very positive effect in more greenhouses and more, well, SmartKas units being built all over the world, because then the same team can be distributed between units, and after the human input is no longer necessary, the AI can take over until the next day. In this case, the drones and robots are basically tools. They act as conductors, just like we use a screwdriver or just like we use a shovel. A drone or robot is essentially a highly effective tool for farming, and they act as watchful eyes outside of the working hours, which can have direct and indirect effects not only on the agricultural industry but also on fisheries and forestries. It can help with disease outbreak prevention, forest fire outbreak prevention, or even a malfunctioning of the greenhouse unit itself, whereby we do not have to rely on just the human element making mistakes. And then another important effect is the salary. Since the workers are transformed, they are now technologically and financially literate personnel staff, which results in a higher average hourly wage than other industries, like the textile manufacturers, car industries, etc. This is already true for greenhouses in general, and it will be more and more increasingly true for SmartKas units in the future. This has, of course, direct and indirect environmental effects as well. High precision farming and hermetically closed units, such as SmartKas, contribute to the reduction in CO2 levels. And then indirect effect is that you produce and consume more and more vegetables, and thereby the reliance on meat-based industry becomes less and less. Another indirect effect, and this is a location-wise direct effect, but theoretically speaking, indirect effect, is the humidification of the area around the SmartKas units, which essentially in hyper-arid areas like the desert can contribute to the reforestation of the desert on its own. And as I mentioned, we are skipping steps in the Industrial Revolution, whereby using drones for transportation, farming, delivery, or information exchange can essentially eliminate the need for expensive and elaborate streets. And then where are we now? What are we achieving right now as a company? Real quickly about our operations. Essentially, as a company, we rely on 4 pillars of operation. We have, of course, the sales and production of SmartKas. The number 2, as you can see on the right side, is the data pillar. This one is very interesting because we are collecting data not only from every single unit, but also from external units that are not necessarily connected to the SmartKas network. And then here we have a vision of having a multi-tiered approach that will be printed and made available on a public blockchain, whereby tier 0 will be filtered amount of information made available for the general public, not only SmartKas clients or the governments themselves, so that agriculture as a whole, the entire agricultural industry can improve, because we see ourselves not only as a company, but as an initiative for the betterment of humankind as a whole. And then the pillar number 3 is the AI and cloud computing. Although the AI and the cloud computing software can very easily be retrofitted to other industries, such as the previously mentioned car and textile manufacturers, we pride ourselves on having state-of-the-art systems and also interface, whereby the growers and the operators And in some cases, the investors themselves can also track and trace the movements and monitor what's happening within the greenhouse, within a SmartKas unit, and therefore have a peace of mind even when not in the greenhouse. And a little bit separately from the three core principles, we have a fourth pillar, which is smart houses. This you can imagine in combination with the building of various eco-villages, such as the ones we are working on in Africa. And these eco-villages can then be connected to the same smart grid as SmartKas, and the previously mentioned redistribution of water and electricity can take place. And then below you see that we have various projects. Within these projects, we pride ourselves on having 6 flagship joint ventures. One of these joint ventures, what you see on the left side, is with His Highness from the ruling family of Abu Dhabi. Through this joint venture, we were inserted into the upcoming Dubai Expo, which will take place next year. It's called 2020, but of course, because of Corona, everything is a little bit delayed. And we are also working together with DP World, which is one of the largest port companies, whereby either full-scale solutions of SmartKas or partial devices can be inserted into the supply chain of DP World. And with these 6 flagship projects, we will essentially target first Europe and the MENA region. And we already have plans working together with high-level institutions for the expansion into the rest of Africa and South America, as mentioned earlier. And then essentially, this is SmartKas from a presentation perspective. Our goal is to make a world a better, more livable place. And our vision and mission is to turn essentially the desert into farmlands and to make access to water and food a basic human right. And yes.
Well, thank you very much, David. It is a pleasure to have you here. It's amazing how the combination of all these technologies are allowing the change in desert areas and also to implement food tracking, and it's just amazing. We have some questions from our audience. Of course, because all the SmartKas units seems to have a huge level of autonomy. There's some people questioning if your solution could be used in space missions or in other planets, like in Mars or other space missions. What do you think?
That's actually a very good and interesting topic. We've been asked this question before, and we are now considering opening an entire department for researching that particular topic. And we are moving soon, by the way, for those of you who don't know, we're moving to a much larger office where we are thinking about then opening an entire department for space research, space farming. We also have a podcast on YouTube, and one of our previous episodes discussed this a little bit in detail. I find it fascinating, and theoretically speaking, it's definitely possible. It's all about the efficiency of such space units or colonial units, if you want to call it, and the longevity of the project. Of course, if you bring enough resources with you, you can operate the units, recirculate a certain amount, but there will always be a certain loss of water, nutrients, and it has to be handled in an extremely high precision environment, especially due to the lack of other resources or renewable resources outside of a space station, so to speak. But it's definitely possible, and we are looking into it.
Mentioning.
Did you have perhaps any other questions?
Yeah, I do have another question. So, is it possible that in a deserted area, as you mentioned, you don't operate without water? You need water to operate. Do you also have water condensation machines to provide an infinite amount of water into the circuit?
Yes. So essentially, as explained, how we solve this problem, it's basically an essential natural law that you need water for life, is by way of recirculating as much as possible. That's true. And then the missing water supply is generated or regenerated by using one or more hybrid solutions. One of these indeed is the condensation, is basically using atmospheric water generators. So the humidity of the air then turn into drinkable water with the pre and post treatment as well. We had discussions about the longevity of actually this solution, because it is recommended by institutions and also our partners to still replace the water every once in a while. Even though it is technically feasible to have a one-on-one water usage efficiency and then basically an infinite supply of water, for the absolute quality and health of not only the plants, of course, but us humans, it is still recommended from time to time to replace or partially replace the water tanks. However, this can be then combated or solved by way of introducing other solutions such as freshwater and rainwater capture if it's available. But if we're strictly talking about desert, where that's not really the case, that's why it's a desert, we can still have pipe solutions leading from nearby water sources such as a sea or an ocean. And then if the unit is large enough to warrant it, we can have a desalination station where then you have a truly non-stop and infinite water supply.
Okay, and the last question from our audience. How can the SmartKas platform interact with previously existing crops? Can it be used as a data center for the surrounding crops?
Yes, absolutely. This is one thing that we are now discussing, especially with one of the regional German governments, is to have a system whereby we are not completely demolishing existing greenhouses and existing farming installations and then building a SmartKas, but instead through various subsidies that are now increasing to countries, even to Spain, as a result of a post-COVID economic package, the government would then subsidize the farmer, and then we would help the farmer upgrade the operations into a near SmartKas level. And then also with the use of various sensors that can also be installed in a simple plastic greenhouse or a farm field with netting over it, we can then connect them to the main interface of SmartKas so that they can make use of some of the features of our system.
Okay, thank you very much, David. It was very, very interesting. I wish we could talk for hours here, but we have to go to the next speaker. Thank you very much for coming to Expodronica.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.